Caleb Rhodes had lived alone on his small ranch for many years, far from towns, far from saloons, and far from the noisy trouble that often traveled with strangers. He liked simple things: the open sky, the quiet of the desert at dusk, the sound of horses breathing in the corral, and the smell of fresh hay. Life was not easy, but it was peaceful, and Caleb had grown to love that peace more than anything else. After long days of riding fences and checking water lines, he often sat by the fire in the small cabin he had built with his own hands, watching the flames rise and listening to the wind move across the dry land. He thought that nothing strange could ever happen out there, so far from crowded places. But one night, everything changed. It started with a knock at his door just after sunset. At first, Caleb thought he had imagined the sound. No one ever came to his ranch at night. He put down the coffee mug in his hand and listened again. The knock came a second time, softer but urgent. His dog, an old mutt named Birch, lifted its head and let out a low growl. Caleb stood up, took his lantern from the table, and moved carefully toward the door. He had met both friendly visitors and dangerous ones in his lifetime, and he could never be sure which type waited outside. When he pushed the door open just enough to see, he froze. A woman stood there. Not just any woman, an Apache woman, young but with eyes that carried worry older than her years. She was breathing hard, like she had been walking fast or running, and dust covered her clothes and hair. Even in the dim lantern light, Caleb could see she was frightened. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she kept glancing over her shoulder into the dark desert behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Caleb had seen Apache people before, but never like this, never alone, never approaching a white rancher's home at night. It was unusual, even dangerous, for her. He leaned forward a little, trying to understand what had brought her here. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he finally asked in a calm voice, keeping his hand away from his gun to show he meant no harm. She swallowed hard before speaking. "I need shelter. Just for tonight." Her English was clear, but her voice shook slightly. "Please. I only need a safe place to sit until morning." Caleb looked at her for several long seconds. He did not know her name or her story. He did not know if someone was chasing her or if she had simply lost her way. But he knew fear when he saw it. And he knew that turning away someone in need, especially in the cold desert night, could cost a life. He stepped back and opened the door wider. "You can come in," he said softly. She hesitated. She seemed surprised that he had not questioned her or refused her. After a moment, she nodded and stepped inside. Caleb shut the door behind her and placed the lantern on the table. Birch sniffed the air, looked at the woman, then lay back down, sensing no threat. The woman stood near the fire, holding her arms close to her chest. Caleb poured water into a cup and handed it to her. She accepted it with both hands and drank slowly, her shoulders still rising and falling with fast breaths. "Thank you," she murmured. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome. You can sit by the fire. You look cold." She moved closer to the warmth and sat on the floor with care, as if listening for sounds only she could hear. Caleb watched her quietly. He understood that rushing a frightened person with questions rarely helped. After a few minutes, she glanced up. "My name is Nalin," she said quietly. Caleb lowered himself onto the chair across from her. She repeated his name softly, as if testing the sound of it. He noticed that she still avoided looking toward the door. "Were you followed?" he asked gently. Nalin paused. Her hand tightened around the cup. "I don't know. I left my village before sundown. I walked fast. I did not hear anyone behind me. But I can't be sure." Caleb did not comment on that. Instead, he slowly added more wood to the fire. Sparks rose into the air like tiny stars, and Nalin watched them with tired eyes. "You can rest here for the night," Caleb said. "No one will bother you." Her shoulders lowered slightly, showing a little relief. She thanked him again, and for the first time, Caleb noticed how weary she looked. Her clothes were worn, and her feet were dusty from long miles of walking. She carried no bag, no blanket, nothing but the clothes she wore. He wondered what had driven her to leave everything behind. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the crackling fire. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind brushed against the cabin walls with a soft whistle. Caleb watched Nalin as her breathing slowly steadied. She was alert, watchful, but no longer shaking. Eventually she spoke. "If you want me to leave before sunrise, I will. I do not want trouble for you." Caleb shook his head. "You're not trouble. Anyone running from danger deserves a safe night." Her eyes softened. "Most wouldn't think so." "Maybe," Caleb replied. "But this is my ranch. I make my own rules." She gave him a faint smile, small but real. Then she grew quiet again, staring at the flames. When dawn came, Nalin stood and prepared to leave. Caleb opened the door for her. The sky was pink, and the air cool. She stepped out, but paused before walking away. "Thank you, Caleb Rhodes," she said. "You showed kindness when you did not have to." He nodded. "Travel safe." She turned and headed toward the distant hills. He thought that would be the end of it, a strange but brief moment in an otherwise quiet life. But he was wrong. That very night, after Caleb finished tending his horses and returned to the cabin, another knock came, softer than the first time. He knew who it was before he even opened the door. Nalin stood there again. She looked tired, her hair messy, dust covering her face. But this time, there was something else in her expression, a deeper worry, a heavier weight. Caleb stepped aside for her to enter. He did not ask why she had returned. Instead, he handed her water and set a bowl of stew near the fire. She ate slowly, thanking him under her breath, her hands trembling slightly as if she hadn't eaten all day. After a long silence, she finally explained, "I thought the danger had passed. I thought they would stop searching for me. But I saw tracks today, fresh ones. Someone was close. I kept moving until sunset, but I could not sleep outside. Not tonight." Caleb listened quietly, his jaw tightening just a little. He understood now that this was not a simple problem. This woman was truly in danger, and whoever hunted her was getting closer. He also knew that helping her again might bring trouble to his doorstep, trouble he had carefully avoided for years. But when he looked at Nalin, sitting by the fire with exhaustion etched into every line of her face, he knew he could not turn her away. He had seen people in desperate situations before. He had seen fear take over a person's life. And he could not let her face that alone. "You can stay," he said again. "As long as you need." Nalin looked up at him, eyes shining with gratitude and worry. "I do not want to become a burden." "You're not," Caleb said simply. "You're someone who needs help. That's enough." Quote 1. She bowed her head slightly in respect. A quiet peace settled over the cabin as the fire glowed warmly. Caleb stayed awake longer than usual, listening for any unusual noise outside. But the night passed without trouble. The next morning, Nalin left again, slipping into the desert at first light. Caleb watched her disappear once more. He told himself she would not return. He believed it for a few hours. But when the sun went down and the desert cooled, another knock came soft, tired, and familiar. Night after night, she came back. And with every return, Caleb felt the peace of his simple life slipping away, replaced by a responsibility he had never planned for, and danger he had not yet seen. The second part of Caleb's strange new life began the moment Nalin returned for the third night in a row. Even before her soft knock reached the cabin door, Caleb already felt her presence outside. It was as if he had learned the rhythm of her steps, the quiet way she stood, the stillness of someone who spent her life reading the land and listening for danger. He pulled the door open before she raised her hand to knock again. Her eyes widened slightly with surprise, but relief washed over her face the moment she saw him. Inside, the fire was already lit. Caleb had cooked extra stew, not fully admitting to himself that he had expected her to return. Nalin sat down cross-legged near the flames, rubbing her cold hands together. Her shoulders drooped with exhaustion. Caleb noticed a long scratch on her arm, red and fresh. "What happened?" he asked gently. She looked down, brushing her fingers over the mark. "I slipped, crossing a dry creek bed. The rocks were loose." "It is nothing." Caleb knew it was more than nothing, not because of the wound but because she was pushing herself too hard. People running from danger rarely slowed down, even when their bodies begged them to rest. He handed her a clean cloth and a cup of warm water. She nodded in thanks, cleaned the cut, and wrapped the cloth around her arm with practiced skill. Caleb sat on his chair, watching her quietly. He wanted to ask questions: who exactly was following her, why she had left her home, and why she trusted him of all people. But every time he opened his mouth, the words stayed trapped in his throat. He sensed that pushing her would break something fragile between them. After she finished eating, she spoke on her own. "There are men from my village," she said in a low voice. "They want to silence me. I saw something I was not meant to see. Something wrong." Caleb listened closely, waiting for her to continue. But she stared into the fire, her face troubled. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said. "Not until you're ready." Nalin seemed grateful for that small mercy. She nodded slowly, as though relieved she didn't have to explain a heavy truth all at once. The night passed quietly, and at dawn she left again, moving through the desert like a shadow. Caleb watched her go, feeling a strange weight in his chest. He told himself it was concern. He told himself it was just worry for a person in danger. But deep down, he felt something else, something he didn't want to name. As the sun climbed higher, Caleb pushed the feeling away and returned to his work. He repaired a broken section of fence, filled the water troughs, and moved the cattle to a new grazing area. But all day, he kept glancing toward the distant ridge where Nalin usually appeared. He forced himself to focus, yet every sound from the desert made him pause. That night, she came again, but this time, her arrival was different. She stumbled toward the cabin, breathing hard, almost collapsing by the door. Caleb rushed to her side and helped her inside. Her face was pale, her legs trembling, and her clothes covered in dust. "What happened?" he asked, voice sharp with concern. Nalin leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "They were close today," she whispered. "Too close. I hid under an old fallen tree when I heard voices. They passed by only a few steps away." Caleb felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was no longer a distant problem. Danger was creeping toward his ranch. Step by step, he guided her to the chair and handed her water. She drank slowly, closing her eyes. "You can't keep running like this," Caleb said quietly. "You'll wear yourself down. You need real rest." "I know," she replied softly. "But if they find me, I do not know what they will do." Caleb didn't speak for a moment. He sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. "This land is big," he said. "There are quiet places to hide, but not if you're alone and too tired to move. You need more than one night of safety." Nalin opened her eyes and met his gaze. "You have already done too much for me." 4-1. 4-1. "Not enough," Caleb said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Not if someone's hunting you." She lowered her head. "I do not want you in danger." "It's too late to think like that," Caleb replied. "You came to me for help. That makes me part of this now." Nalin's eyes softened with gratitude, but worry remained in them. She stretched her legs toward the fire, sighing deeply. Caleb could see how tired she was. Her body was strong, built for the demands of her life, but exhaustion showed in every movement. As the night deepened, Caleb moved a blanket closer to her and rested his hand lightly on the back of the chair. "You can sleep as long as you need," he said. "I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too," she whispered. "I'll manage." For the first time in many years, Caleb stayed awake through most of the night, listening for any unusual sound outside. The desert wind brushed against the cabin, rattling the shutters. Coyotes yipped far in the distance, but he heard nothing else. Birch slept beside the door, ears twitching occasionally but not fully waking. Just before dawn, Caleb saw something that made his heart tighten. Nalin slept deeply, arms wrapped around herself, head resting against the side of the chair. In sleep, the strong, careful woman looked fragile, almost young. A person shouldn't have to live in fear like that. And it angered Caleb in a way he hadn't expected. When morning came, Nalin woke slowly, blinking at the soft light. She apologized for falling asleep so early, but Caleb shook his head. "You needed it." After a simple breakfast, she prepared to leave again. This time, she walked toward the desert with slower steps, as if she wasn't sure where to go. Caleb stood on the porch, watching her hesitate. "Be careful out there," he said. "I will try," she replied. All day, Caleb couldn't shake the worry crawling up his spine. He double-checked the fence lines, looked for tracks near his property, and even climbed the hill behind his cabin to look for movement in the distance. At one point, he saw faint dust far away, maybe riders, maybe just the wind, but his uneasiness grew. That night, Nalin returned again, but Caleb saw her approaching from farther than usual. She moved like a person who had walked for hours without stopping. When she reached the porch, she leaned against the post, breathing heavily. Caleb helped her inside once more and took her pack small, almost weightless. She carried nothing of value, only a small pouch and a thin cloth. It struck him how alone she truly was. This time, she did not wait for Caleb to ask. She spoke as soon as she caught her breath. "I cannot keep running like this," she said quietly. "But I cannot return to my village. The men who hunt me are still searching. They will not stop until they find me." Caleb sat across from her, hands clasped. "Then you need a place where they can't reach you." She nodded. "I know, but I don't know where that place is." He thought for a long moment. "You could stay here," he said at last. "At least for a few days. Until you regain your strength." Nalin looked startled. "But that would bring danger to your home." Caleb shrugged slightly. "Danger finds people anywhere, but I won't let you face it alone." For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, she bowed her head slightly, in acceptance. "Thank you." That single word held more weight than anything else she had said. From that night onward, Nalin stayed on the ranch instead of leaving at sunrise. She helped with chores, moving quietly, but with purpose. She carried buckets, fed the horses, and even repaired a loose hinge on the barn door. Caleb was surprised by how quickly she adapted to his routine, as though she'd always been there. But peace was not meant to last. One afternoon, while Caleb was tending to the cattle, Nalin climbed the ridge behind the house to keep watch. When she returned, her face was pale. "There were tracks," she said softly. "Fresh. 3 riders. They passed near your land." Caleb felt the air grow heavier. The danger had finally reached his doorstep, and he knew the quiet life he once had was gone, replaced by a responsibility he could no longer ignore. The morning after Nalin spotted the fresh tracks, Caleb woke with a heavy feeling in his chest. He had known danger was coming, but hearing it from her lips made it real. The quiet ranch he had lived on for years no longer felt safe. The air itself seemed tense, as if the land was holding its breath. When Caleb stepped outside, the sun was rising slowly, casting long shadows across the desert. Even Birch, the old dog, stayed close to his legs instead of wandering around the yard as usual. Nalin was already awake. She stood near the corral, her eyes scanning the distant hills. She did not speak at first, and neither did Caleb. The silence said enough. After a long moment, she turned to him. "Those riders are searching," she said softly. "They are not passing through by accident." Caleb nodded grimly. He leaned on the fence rail, looking out at the open land. "If they come here, they'll expect me to hand you over." Nalin lowered her head. "I don't want you caught in my trouble. If I leave now—" "No," Caleb interrupted firmly. "You're tired. Your legs can barely carry you. You leave now. They'll find you in an hour." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She knew he was right. She had been running for too long, too far, with too little rest. For most of the morning, they worked quietly. Caleb reinforced the fence beside the cabin and checked the rifle hanging over the doorway, making sure it was clean and ready. He hoped he wouldn't need it, but hoping was not the same as preparing. Around midday, Nalin approached him again. Her face was calm, but her hands twisted nervously at the hem of her shirt. "I need to tell you the whole truth," she said. "You deserve to know why they are hunting me." Caleb stopped what he was doing and gave her his full attention. She rarely spoke about herself, so her words carried weight. Nalin took a deep breath and began. "In my village there are two groups. One wants peace with the outside world. The other wants to keep fighting. I helped gather food and herbs for my people. I never thought I would be part of their arguments." Caleb listened in silence as she continued. "One evening, I returned early from gathering plants. I heard voices near the council fire. I hid behind a large rock to avoid interrupting. But I heard something I should not have heard. 3 men were planning to lie to the chief, to blame the peaceful ones for something they did. They wanted to cause a split, to take power." Her voice trembled slightly. "When they realized someone might have seen them, they began questioning people. Then they learned that I had been nearby." Caleb understood now. She was not running from the whole village, only from the men who wanted control. Dangerous men. Men who would gladly harm her to protect their secret. Nalin looked at the ground. "I left to protect myself, but also to protect others. If they captured me, they would force me to say things that could cause more conflict. I didn't want to be used like that." Caleb felt a surge of respect for her. She wasn't just running away. She was trying to keep her people from fighting each other. That took courage. "Why come to me?" he asked gently. Nalin lifted her eyes, and for a moment he saw a flicker of fear mixed with trust. "I knew your ranch from a distance. I passed it many times while gathering plants. You were always kind to your animals, always respectful of the land. I thought, maybe you would give me one night of safety." Caleb felt his chest tighten. She had chosen his ranch because she sensed something decent about him. And because of that trust, he was now pulled into her dangerous situation. "You did the right thing coming here," Caleb said quietly. Nalin's shoulders relaxed slightly, but worry still clouded her face. "We'll handle it," Caleb said, though his voice held more determination than certainty. The rest of the day passed slowly. The wind blew stronger, carrying dust across the yard. Caleb checked the perimeter several times. More tracks appeared near the far ridge, just faint lines in the dirt. But clear enough to know riders had been circling. By evening, Caleb lit the lamp inside the cabin and locked the door. Nalin stayed by the window, peering into the darkness. Birch sat with his head raised, ears alert. "They're close," Nalin whispered. Caleb nodded. "I know." Then, close to midnight, Caleb heard a faint sound, like a hoof striking stone. Then another. He put out the lamp quickly, plunging the cabin into shadows. Nalin held her breath and moved away from the window. Outside, the riders moved slowly. They did not speak. The silence was more frightening than noise. Birch growled softly, but Caleb placed a calming hand on the dog's head. A shadow passed near the porch. Someone dismounted. Caleb gripped his rifle, but did not raise it. He did not want to start trouble, but he was ready if trouble came. A knock sounded slow, firm, and deliberate. Nalan's eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. Caleb motioned for her to stay hidden behind the table. He stepped toward the door and pressed his ear against it. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady. A man answered, his voice sharp. "We're looking for someone. A woman passed through this land. Apache. We know she came this way." Caleb's gut tightened. He chose his words carefully. "Haven't seen anyone. My land is quiet. Just me and my dog." A long silence followed. Caleb could feel the man thinking, searching for any hint of truth or lie. Then, the voice returned. "You mind if we look around?" "Yes, I mind," Caleb replied calmly. "This is private property. You've no right to wander here at night." Another silence. Then, the man's tone sharpened with threat. "You hiding her, cowboy?" Caleb didn't step back. "If I were, it'd still be none of your business." The man cursed under his breath. Caleb heard footsteps moving away, then whispers among the riders. After a long moment, the sound of hooves faded into the distance. Only when the desert grew silent again did Caleb exhale. Nalan stepped out from behind the table, her face still pale. "You risked yourself," she said softly. Caleb shook his head. "You were right. They don't want justice. They want control. I won't let them take you." Fear mixed with gratitude in her eyes. She stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly. "What will they do now?" "What?" "They'll come back," Caleb answered honestly. "They won't give up." Nalan tightened her hands together. "You should not fight my battle." "I'm not fighting your battle," Caleb said. "I'm doing what's right." The next morning, the sun rose red, as if the desert itself sensed trouble coming. Caleb walked out onto the porch and saw fresh horse tracks only a few yards from his house. They had circled around during the night, looking for signs. This was no longer just a hiding place. The ranch had become a target. Caleb knew that staying here was no longer safe for either of them. He thought long and hard as he saddled his horse. Nalan watched him quietly, waiting for him to speak. "We can't stay here," Caleb finally said. "They know you're close. They'll keep searching until they find this place." Nalan's eyes filled with worry. "Where will we go?" Nalan's. "Where will we go?" Caleb tightened the saddle strap and met her gaze. "To Fort Garland. It's the only place where the law might listen and protect you. The men hunting you wouldn't dare attack a military post." Nalan stared at him in shock. "That is far. And dangerous. It's the safest choice." Caleb insisted. "You need real protection. Not just a cabin and a tired cowboy. But the riders will come after us." Caleb nodded. Nalan hesitated for a long moment, then finally nodded. "If you believe this is right, I will trust you." Caleb felt the weight of that trust settle heavily on his shoulders. He was about to risk everything, his ranch, his safety, possibly his life, to protect a woman whose only crime was hearing the wrong words at the wrong moment. As he prepared the second horse for Nalan, he realized the truth. He had reached his breaking point. He could no longer wait for the danger to come. He would face it head on. He would do the unthinkable. He would ride straight into the heart of authority with an Apache woman beside him, something no one in the region would ever expect. And whatever happened next would change both their lives forever. Caleb woke before sunrise the next morning, long before the first bird even thought of singing. The sky was still dark, the desert quiet, and the air cold enough to sting his lungs. He packed food, water, and blankets into 2 small bags. Everything he chose had to be light, because speed was more important than comfort. Nalan helped silently, handing him straps, tightening knots, and checking the saddle on her horse. There was no need for many words. They both understood the situation clearly. When the horses were finally ready, Caleb looked around his ranch one last time. He saw the corral he had built when he first bought the land, the barn he repaired every spring, and the small cabin where he had lived alone for years. He wondered if he would ever return. The place felt different now, no longer just a home. It felt like something he was leaving behind, for a greater purpose. Nalin watched him quietly, reading the change in his expression. "You are leaving something important," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "Yes, but leaving doesn't mean giving up. It means doing what must be done." Nalin lowered her gaze. "I am sorry." He shook his head. "You're not the reason. The reason is the men chasing you. They're the ones who brought this trouble." She didn't argue. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on the horse's reins, steadying herself. Caleb mounted his horse, and Nalin did the same. Their breath rose in white clouds into the cold morning air. "We ride east," Caleb said. "If we leave now, we can reach the base of Black Rock Mesa before midday." Nalin nodded. "I will follow you." They began moving, their horses trotting quietly through the open land. At first, the world seemed peaceful, but after a few miles, the desert changed. The wind grew stronger, blowing dust across the ground. The sun slowly pushed its way over the horizon, painting the land gold. Caleb looked behind them every few minutes, searching for signs of riders. For the first hour, the land remained empty. But Nalin was tense in her saddle. She kept glancing back, her shoulders tight, her eyes sharp. "They will come," she whispered. "I can feel it." Caleb didn't doubt her. She had lived her entire life reading the land. If she sensed something, it was real. Before midday, they reached Black Rock Mesa, a tall ridge of dark stone that cut across the desert like a giant wall. Caleb led the way along a narrow path at its base. The horses moved carefully over loose stones. Halfway through the pass, Caleb suddenly stopped his horse and lifted his hand for silence. Hoofbeats. Faint, but unmistakable. Nalin froze. "They are close," she whispered. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We need to move faster." They urged the horses forward, but the pass was narrow. Going too fast could make a horse slip and break a leg. They had to be smart. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, echoes bouncing off the stone walls. Nalin's heartbeat pounded like a drum in her chest. Caleb looked back again and saw dust rising in the distance. "They found our trail," he said. The riders appeared moments later, 3 men on horseback, moving fast, their silhouettes sharp against the bright sky. Nalin gripped her reins tightly, fear flashing across her face. Caleb shouted, "Go! Stay close to me." They raced through the pass as quickly as they dared. Loose rocks rolled beneath the horses' hooves. One wrong step could send them tumbling. But the riders behind them were gaining ground. The narrow path finally opened into a wide stretch of desert, and Caleb signaled for speed. The horses burst forward. The wind tore at their faces. Dust flew in clouds behind them. Caleb heard the shouts of the men chasing them. He glanced back. Only 200 yards separated them now. Too close. Nalin leaned low over her horse, urging it with every ounce of strength. Caleb pushed his horse harder, guiding them toward a slope that led into an even wider valley. Once they reached open ground, they could try to outrun the riders. But the sound of hoofbeats behind them grew louder, faster. Caleb's heart hammered. He knew they wouldn't make Fort Garland before being caught. Not at this pace. Not without something drastic. "We have to lose them," Caleb shouted over the wind. Nalin looked at him with worry. "How?" Caleb scanned the landscape quickly. A cluster of tall boulders stood ahead on the left. If they moved behind them, they might break the rider's line of sight for a moment. "Follow me!" he yelled. He sharply pulled the reins and turned left. Nalin followed without question. They rode behind the boulders and into a narrow dip in the land. Caleb stopped suddenly and jumped off his horse. "Down," he whispered. Nalin dismounted and crouched beside him, hiding behind a thick rock. Their horses stood nearby, breathing heavily, sides rising and falling fast. Caleb placed a calming hand on his horse's neck, trying to keep it still. The riders thundered into the open area just moments later. Their horses kicked up dust. The men scanned the land, confused when they didn't see their targets. "They went east," one man shouted. "No, they went north," another argued. Caleb held his breath. One wrong move, a cough, a hoarse snort, a falling stone, and they'd be discovered. Finally, the leader shouted, "Spread out! They can't be far." The riders split up and galloped in different directions. Caleb and Nalin stayed hidden until the hoofbeats faded into silence. When they climbed back onto their horses, Caleb could see Nalin's hands shaking. But she steadied herself quickly. "We must keep moving," she said. "They will search every direction." Caleb nodded. "Then we ride faster." They moved again, but this time Caleb chose a more difficult path, one with twists, dips, and hard ground that would hide their tracks better. Hour after hour, they traveled under the burning sun. Sweat ran down Caleb's back. Nalin's lips were dry and cracked. By late afternoon, they finally saw something hopeful in the distance. A small group of wooden buildings near a tall flagpole. Fort Garland. Safety. Nalin let out a shaky breath. "We made it." But Caleb knew better. "Not yet. We're close, but not safe." When they reached the fort's entrance, two soldiers approached them at once. Their faces were strict, their hands gripping their rifles. "State your business," one soldier said. Caleb sat tall on his horse. "This woman is in danger. She needs protection. And I need to speak to the commander." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. "Is she Apache?" one asked, eyeing Nalin carefully. "Yes," Caleb replied. "And she's under my protection." The soldiers looked surprised by his bold words, but finally agreed to let them enter. Inside the fort, everything felt tense. Men moved with purpose, and the sound of boots echoed across the yard. Caleb helped Nalin down from her horse. She stood close to him, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes watching her. The commander, Captain Morris, came forward. He had a stern face, but sharp, intelligent eyes. Caleb quickly explained everything: Nalin's danger, the riders hunting her, the lies from her village, and the chase that brought them here. Captain Morris listened quietly, thinking carefully before speaking. "You brought trouble to my doorstep, Mr. Rhodes," he said. "But you also brought the truth. And truth matters." Nalin lowered her head respectfully. "I did not want to cause harm." The captain studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You won't be harmed here," he said. "You're under the fort's protection now." Relief washed over Nalin's face. Caleb felt his shoulders relax for the first time in days. But the commander wasn't finished. "As for the men chasing you," he said, "we'll send scouts to intercept them. They won't trouble you anymore." Nalin bowed in gratitude. Caleb exhaled slowly. The danger was finally ending. Later, when the sun had nearly set, Caleb sat on a bench outside the barracks. Nalin joined him quietly. For a long time, they said nothing. The fort was calm. Soldiers walked by, but none bothered them. Finally, Nalin spoke. "You gave up your home to bring me here," she said. "You risked everything." Caleb looked at her gently. "Some risks are worth taking." Nalin's voice softened. "I will always remember your kindness." Caleb nodded. "And I'll remember your courage." The sky above them turned orange, then red, then deep purple. For the first time in many nights, Nalin felt truly safe. Caleb felt lighter too, knowing he had done the right thing. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if he would return to his ranch or stay near the fort for a while. But one thing was clear. He had made a choice that changed both their lives. A cowboy and an Apache woman, two people from different worlds, had walked through danger together and reached safety because they trusted each other. And that trust would stay with them forever.